Discussion about Linda Moulton Howe's military and aerospace whistleblowers update from the 2024 Conscious Life Expo and the connection to the secret space program's Planetary Corporation's Mars bases. Hi, it's Ileana. So I have recently been listening to Linda Moulton Howe's military and aerospace whistleblowers update for 2024. This was done at the Conscious Life Expo in Los Angeles several months ago, where she gave this report at the conference. And I think the information that she presented is groundbreaking. So I'm just going to start to preface what the information is, the background of it. Then I'm going to go into the mapping of some special things on Mars. So Linda has been in touch for the last couple of years with an aerospace engineer through proton mail, exchanging information where this aerospace engineer, he told her that there is a Jsoc, Joint Special Operations Command, U.S. base on Mars with 1,500 operatives working on the base, both military, scientists, engineers, rotating and working there as a joint project of investigation exploration of Mars. The Jsoc base is located underground in the Gale crater, and this base was built out on extensions of other ancient structure facilities, bases, and cities that had been built on Mars millions of years ago. There's ancient structures all over Mars from previous humanoid civilizations, Anunnaki, reptilian civilizations that have lived on Mars. So what this whistleblower, aerospace engineer whistleblower, told Linda is that Jsoc had found evidence of a Phoenician race of humanoids living on Mars to this day underground, in underground structures. They're Phoenicians, they're the original indigenous race on Mars. When the whole nuclear war happened, it decimated their race along with other beings that lived on Mars. Currently, there's about 6,000 of these humanoid beings living on Mars underground. They are just normal, basic humanoids living on the planet. They're not super advanced, but they had been originally responsible for the creation of numbers and letters, and they had traveled to Earth pre-Christopher Columbus, and they had lived in the Americas. So they had come from Mars to Earth when they were more advanced, and they still had space flight technology thousands of years ago. Now they are more simplistic, living in underground dwellings, and they just want to be left alone. They don't want to be part of any of the base stuff that's happening with Jsoc. But they're these beings, these Phoenicians, tall Phoenicians, that looked similar to the Sumerians and similar to the group of genetic humans living in Lebanon right now, according to Linda. That's what they look in similarity like. There's also original Mars colonists that are Native American looking as well. Small pockets of them on Mars from other research that I know of. And reptilians and insectoid beings living on Mars as well. So that's part of what was disclosed to Linda. The other part, what was disclosed, is that U.S. Space Force Space Command has several different spaceships, Space Command ships that can go beyond the speed of light, faster than the speed of light, because they have these Alcubierre warp drive space systems and non-Alcubierre systems that can literally, they're not traveling through space itself. They're going not through space at the speed of light. They're traveling, and it's not interdimensional or dimensional travel. They're passing space. Think of hyperspace. That's kind of what they're going through with field guide, quantum field warp engines that can bend space-time. So it doesn't take them light years of like 4 years to travel through space from one solar system to another. It only takes a quantum warp drive jump takes about, it's only like 6 light years, and it's done in 4 days. With more advanced technology that they now have, with the quantum field drives, they can do 50 light years within a couple of seconds, according to this whistleblower. And they serve on this Jsoc Joint Special Operations Command U.S. Space for about from 2 to 6 years rotations. Again, scientists, military personnel, and other people who have the know-how to study Mars, the ancient stuff on Mars. So they can spend anywhere from 2 to 6 years doing missions on this base. From what she said at the Conscious Life Expo, according to her whistleblower contact. And she had another man in the 1980s that talked to her about this Mars base. And he was working at the White Sands Proving Ground. So he was connected in the military. Linda has various sources of contacts and whistleblowers who have reported on various things to her. So going back to this aerospace whistleblower, he's saying that he's worked with tall whites on engineering problems in a very large aerospace corporation. So he had worked with for several months with a tall white who is able to send out his consciousness, his soul frequency, into the future and work out mathematical and engineering problems to bring back information into the present time field, present time from the future, see future events, see how to fix the problem, engineering problem, bring back the information to present time to tell this aerospace engineer how to incorporate certain formulas and workarounds and fixes to fix an engineering problem. Also, human military and Space Command and the Navy have been working with the tall whites, the Nordics, and tall grays on various space projects, space flight, developing anti-gravity warp drive systems for these spaceships that travel beyond the speed of light, going faster than light speed, with various plasma drives, warp drives, Alcubierre, non-Alcubierre, and they're doing quantum tunneling, quantum field jumping, space jumping with these spaceships, with the help of the tall whites, in particular the Nordics, or the blue-eyed, blonde-haired people. Those are Nordics. And tall grays, the original organic tall grays that are not clones. And the tall grays have been helping other civilizations whose star systems, their suns have gone nova, and they needed help, so they needed tissue samples and stuff. So the human abductions, where egg samples, semen, stuff of the nature of the cattle mutilations happened. There's like force fields and tractor beam technology that works with light and photons, where it's a tractor beam from the UFO craft, and that's how they can beam out people and cattle and other animals like horses. So US government and other governments around the world had made agreements with certain factions of the Greys where this experimentation was done on people. The tall Greys are working more of in alignment with protection of Earth, and tall whites and the Nordics not so much abduction, but tall Greys have been involved in doing tissue sample research of how to genetically revive ancient civilizations that are on the brink of extinction because of something happening in their solar systems, their planets, sensitivity to the sun, something happening to their suns where they no longer have the ability to protect their skin, helping with genetic stuff. And Linda said that the US government and military projects are doing studies on finding human galactic extraterrestrial hybrids, that there's hybrid programs looking for these special humans who have extraterrestrial genetics in their system, in their human bodies. It could be connected to past lives as being extraterrestrials. All of us have been seeded on this planet from other galactic races. We come from other places, not just from Earth. So many humans are actual hybrids or extraterrestrials that look humanoid living on Earth, who these programs are trying to find as well. So Linda had discussed all of this stuff in Cosmic Life Expo, Conscious Life Expo, not Cosmic, Conscious Life Expo, this year, beginning of 2024. And this is all cosmically related because the governments are not disclosing any of this information to humans. Linda talked about the troglodytes, which are insect-like beings living about 10,000 light years away from Earth, and they're otherwise called the walking sticks. They can shapeshift, and according to the tall whites, these troglodytes, they want to infiltrate the Earth and take over the planet. So the tall whites work with the tall grays and the Nordics with agreements with Earth governments to protect this planet Earth from that invasion. And that's why Jsoc has that Joint Special Operations Command US base on Mars as a monitoring station for that particular purpose. And Linda mentioned that Aim Hashed, who was the director of the Israeli Space Force, that he was read in on this special operations base on Mars, and that he wrote a book, and that he mentioned that on Mars there's a lot of different ancient ruins and structures, like a fort was built, and he included some pictures in his book. So Haim Eshed has been read in on all of this stuff. Even some presidents, like US presidents, this information is so top classified that even they don't have access to it, to this information. which Linda's source read her in on. So that was interesting in her presentation. There could be other extraterrestrial aggressive beings that could potentially be a threat to Earth. Reverse engineered technology, what David Grush has discussed. Some crafts have crashed here on Earth, and Linda was discussing this also. She agrees that Grush is a true whistleblower. There's been other crash retrievals beyond the 1947 3 spacecrafts with the shorter gray beings, kind of reptilian-like gray beings that crashed in Corona, Roswell, New Mexico, where those 3 crafts were. There was also one in the 1950s where tall grays had crashed. One of the tall grays had survived the crash, and he was taken into one of the military bases in the U.S., and there was a military person who was psychically gifted. They were able to communicate with this tall gray and find out information that the tall grays know the true history of Earth going back millions, like 200 million years ago. And it's called the Yellow Book. And this Yellow Book was given as a gift to the US government and scientists, where it tells the true history of our solar system, how the universe was formed. So it's a holographic Yellow Book with many species of different beings and Earth history. You open it up and it's holographic. You click on, like you point with your finger, click on something, and it gives you holographic images of live movies of how information is presented. So this tall gray talked about that, how that technology works, that some of these beings come from Epsilon Eridani, like tall whites, tall grays. Tall whites come from Sirius A and B. Tall grays come from other places, not just Orion, and that tall grays have different skin color as well. They can have red skin, not just gray skin. So that was interesting. All this information that the tall gray shared with Linda, shared with that military personnel who is psychic, and this information was given to Linda by her sources. And this is also interesting, another part, that the triangular crafts, the black triangular crafts, the TR3B, the TR3M, they are surveillance crafts. They're truly anti-gravitic, and other bigger sort of cigar-shaped crafts, also anti-gravitic. They have these live skin layers of bismuth, zinc, magnesium, built as lattice works, like live skin, that protect these crafts and which allows them to go faster than the speed of light. So the TR3Bs, TR3Ms, and other advanced crafts truly are anti-gravitic. They can float, they can hover, they can go underwater. Some of these gravitic crafts can go underwater submersible crafts. They can also go beyond Earth orbit and travel to other solar systems. She also discussed that information, and that's some of the things that David Grush and others, like Christopher Mellon, Lou Elizondo, have also presented that these UFO characteristics, they come from beings like tall grays, tall whites, Nordics, reptiloid beings. And there's also, Linda mentioned that there's a huge base inside the moon of Ganymede. Ganymede is one of Jupiter's biggest moons, and the tall whites have a huge base inside Ganymede because they're using that base also as a monitoring station against the troglodytes, the tall walking insectoids, or what is called the Jerusalem large crickets. They look like that, but those crickets aren't from Jerusalem, but they migrated to Jerusalem. So this is some of the highlights from listening to the Conscious Life Expo, Linda's presentation at that conference. But what was most interesting to me is when Linda showed a map of Mars, showed the Jsoc, Joint Special Operations U.S. base inside the Gale crater, that this is an underground secret military facility that has been there since the 1980s or even before that. When you go, that's in the Aeolus Mensa region. And when you go to Aeolus Planum, when you go higher to Cerberus Palus, what do you see up there? Near that crater, there's a Planetary Corporation Space 5, which I remember serving on, doing my 60 and back through the Quantum Leap time travel program. And what's on that base? This is where the holographic medical pods are manufactured in cybernetics labs, along with Neuralink implants designed by Nordics that work on the base. The Neuralink implants in the brain allow to consciously connect to other computer systems on the Mars basis through a quantum consciousness network. And this technology is 300 years more advanced than any tech currently on Earth. And beside this Planetary Corporation Space 5, beside that base, there are underground cavern systems where top secret labs are being housed. So those underground cavern systems have top secret labs that run from Cerberus Palus. My guess is going to the Gale crater. Perhaps there's an interconnection between these two facilities. They're close in proximity. It's only like if you take a Range Rover and do a trip, it's not too far. And I had talked about the Planetary Corporation Space 5 I talked about it 3 years ago. Source of the information is Ileana K. That's me. It was published in my book, Star Travelers' Life Experiences with UFOs, ETs, SSPs, and Past Lifetimes, Volume 1, and the book was published on March 25th, 2022. And the Conscious Life Expo, where Linda had her conference presentation, that was in the beginning of 2024. So the proximity between these two bases, finally, there's some proof of concepts. There's interesting information about the topography and geography of Mars. Planetary Corporation Space is a U.S.-run corporation military base on Mars. It's an SSP base, Secret Space Program base. Jsoc is Joint Special Operations Command, U.S. base, on Mars, with 1,500 workers there and operatives, military, scientists, and other specialists who are mapping and investigating Mars. The face of Mars, the pyramids, those are buildings that some of the Venusians had built, the Anunnaki, the ancient civilizations that lived on Mars before that nuclear war destruction. And Linda mentioned that. So that's interesting information as well. But that proximity to these two bases, who would have thought? There's a Jsoc base not too far away from Planetary Corporation Space 5. The proximity is sort of the proof. I mean, I had done this several years ago, this mapping of my testimony and my memories from the SSP, serving in the SSP, way before this information was presented by Linda. I could not have known that there's a Jsoc Special Operations Command U.S. base in proximity to another U.S. corporation's military base near a crater. They seem to like to build things inside craters or near craters in domed facilities that are shielded by electromagnetic energy, so you can't even pick up the fact that these bases are there, because electromagnetic shielding is literally providing a force field shield, so it can't be, the base itself, the buildings of the base cannot be picked up by telescopes or radar on the surface of Mars. So these bases are shielded. They're military corporation bases. But this particular Jsoc base is underground in the Gale crater, underneath the Gale crater. And Planetary Corp is on the surface beside a crater with underground cavern systems being used to build top secret labs that are housed there. That's from my own testimony of what I witnessed on Mars, that Planetary Corp Base 5. So I had done that mapping 3-4 years ago, and it was officially released in my book. And now Linda and her whistleblower sources are providing confirmation about other U.S. bases on Mars. All of this is interconnected, and I'm going to show that original map that I had published in my book 3 years ago. So this is Mars Planetary Corporation Space 5, and I had written, beside the base are underground cavern systems where top secret labs are being housed. And there's a set of directions and coordinates. 1025.33.12 north, 150.16.55.26 east. There's even Google Mars coordinates and the elevation of this base, 7,820 feet. This base is protected by electromagnetic shielding, by a dome system. So it's shielded. You can't see it on the surface. It has literal holographic shielding with this electromagnetic technology that covers the dome of the base. And I had labeled this as geographical locations of SSP and PLC bases, planetary corporations bases on Moon and Mars. My book includes the Mars, like both the Moon bases for SSP locations and Mars, both. It's all in the book. And there's also a video on all of the locations of the Moon bases and the Mars bases. Another interesting thing that Linda was talking about is that her whistleblower source, that aerospace engineer, had told her that the tall grays mine helium-3 on the Moon, that they have mining operations. For the Moon maps, I had put that the secret space programs, lunar space operations, also has mining programs on the Moon near huge craters. So tall grays come to the moon periodically to mine helium-3. Also, Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin, when they had landed on the moon, Neil Armstrong actually saw extraterrestrials in UFO crafts on the moon. Guess what he saw? He saw tall grays. Neil Armstrong had seen tall grays. That's another interesting fact that the aerospace engineer shared with Linda, that some of these US astronauts during the Apollo missions, the ones that were successful to land on the moon, Apollo missions, the astronauts saw extraterrestrials on the moon, because some of these tall grays come to the moon for mining operations of the helium-3 and other things that they have in their installations, temporarily coming to the moon. And Neil Armstrong saw that. Buzz Aldrin saw tower structures on the moon, and he said there's other megalithic structures on Mars several years ago. Then he retracted all of that testimony. So this is all interconnected in cosmology, and this is all being hidden from us. So I'd like to thank Linda Moulton Howe for having the courage to come forward and disclose this information publicly in a conference, which Conscious Life Expo is a huge conference. It's a big event that happens every year. So good for her for disclosing that information. And I wanted to share about planetary corporations and the secret space programs. Those two, the Jsoc base and Planetary Corp Base 5, are in close proximity. There's many more other planetary corporations bases. I know of 11 of them that are on Mars and lunar space operations facilities on the moon. All of that is mapped. All of that is in the book and also in my video, and I'll leave the links below to all of that information for anybody who's interested in following the source of the informational evidence. And we are not alone. There's extraterrestrials working with human military, Navy, and Space Command. Tall whites, tall grays, Nordics. They work on these space bases on the moon and Mars. And secret space programs are a reality of what's going on Moon and Mars. That they've had these bases for a very long time, and they've been able to successfully reverse engineer crafts that have either been shot down by EMP, scalar wave technology since the 1940s, reverse engineer it, anti-gravitic crafts, and successfully have them flying since the 1980s, having these bases built out since the 1960s on the moon, and then 1970s, 80s on Mars and beyond. There's full infrastructures where human beings live and work on the moon and Mars and work with extraterrestrials, military and corporations working together on this. That's a fact of life in 2024 and has been for the last 80 to 90 years. So I wanted to add what I know about all of that and add to some of Linda's info a little bit more with the mapping for the Mars stuff and disclose a little more info of what I know. Thank you so much.